there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 1974 horror anthology From Beyond the Grave. This shitty cover art deserves to be fucking buried, if you ask me. Like, this cover art is awful. And this film actually has a pretty great poster. Like, that's what's really insulting about this shitty Photoshop hack job cover art. It makes the movie look like a total piece of shit. And sadly, it isn't really that great of a movie, but it's not as bad as this cover. The original cover art is a million times better, and I don't know why Warner Brothers did not use that. This is a part of the Twisted Terror Collection box set, and I think you can also buy it separately. This is the last horror anthology from Amicus. And sadly, they did not go out with a bang. They went out with a whimper. There is one story in this that I legitimately liked. There's another one that I had some dumb fun with, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not that great. This one was disappointing. I'd heard some good things about it. I'd even heard people say it was their favorite out of the Amicus horror anthologies. I don't get the praise for this one. Teach their own. I have no issue with anyone that likes this one or thinks it's a gem, but I'm not one of them. I thought this movie was absolutely miserably slow-paced. It was a slow, plodding horror anthology, and there wasn't a lot of consistency in terms of the strength of the stories, and there wasn't really that great of... the wraparound, it was there. It was fun to see Peter Cushing playing this antique shop owner who is somehow involved with the fates of these characters, but it kind of felt like he was just there, and there really wasn't that much of a connection between him and what happens to these people. The most connection that there is the items he sells to these people. Which, okay, alright, it's kind of a precursor to the Friday the 13th, the series, in a way. But I'd definitely rather watch that show than watch this again. So, it was released in 1974, and another low-budget production from Amicus. It did not do very well. In fact, I believe it was a pretty big bomb, and that pretty much ended the horror anthologies for Amicus. And after this, they did a few other films, but they weren't horror anthologies. From Beyond the Grave is directed by Kevin Connor, and at times the direction is actually pretty good. Other times, it's just serviceable or average or mediocre. I really wish that Freddie Francis directed this. It would have been a nice way to send off the Amicus horror anthologies since he kind of started the whole thing. But no, they went with Kevin Connor. And it's like I said, it's there. The direction isn't terrible, but it's not that great either. It's written by Raymond Christodoulou. Jesus Christ, what a fucking last name. And Robin Clark. And for the most part, these stories, they are either predictable, or they go on too long, or the twists are terrible, or they're trying to be funny and goofy, and at times it does make me kind of chuckle, but it doesn't help with the horror aspect. The issue with this is it doesn't take itself seriously enough most of the time. Asylum had its moments of black humor, but it also knew when to actually give a shit and actually take things seriously, which actually made the film more suspenseful and made it more of a entertaining and enthralling experience. When you have a horror anthology, it's like watching multiple different movies all in one movie, and that's why the horror anthology, or the anthology film period, is one of the hardest things to get right, and this is a prime example of that. You have 2 or 3 bad stories out of 4 stories and a weak wraparound, and you got a pretty awful horror anthology. You got a pretty horrible horror anthology. The cast, it's fine. I mean, Peter Cushing comes back. You got Donald Pleasence. It was nice to see him, and he did fine, but the segment that he was in was awful. It was an absolutely putrid segment. It was one of the most slow-paced and boring segments I've seen in a long time. There were some aspects of it that were memorable, like the creepy girl who is played by Angela Pleasence. Like, Donald Pleasence's actual daughter is in this, and I think it's his daughter, and might not be his daughter, it might be his sister. I don't know for sure, but like one of his family members is in this, and she is absolutely just shiveringly creepy. Just one of the most creepy looking and acting girls you'll see in a movie. She was the best part about that segment. Other than that, and I'll get to that a little bit more later. I just wanted to vent about that one because I just thought it was so terrible, and the twist didn't make any sense to me. I thought it was rushed. But anyway, you have Donald Pleasence, David Warner's in the first segment. You have Ian Carmichael, Nyree Dawn Porter, Margaret Leighton. You have Ian Oglivy. Lesley-Anne Down is also in this in an early role. Jack Watson is also in one of the segments. The cast is fine, but other like Donald Pleasence and David Warner, like a lot of them, and Angela Pleasence was pretty good too. A lot, and I honestly did enjoy Margaret Leighton as Madame Orloff. She was one of the main reasons why I could even watch the Elemental segment. But the cast, while there are some good performances here and there, it's nowhere near the level of something like Asylum or even The House That Dripped Blood. The film also suffers from cinematography that is hit and miss. Alan Hume's cinematography in The Gatecrasher is impressive, easily some of the best aspects of the film, some of the best things about the movie. Same goes for the cinematography in The Door, which is absolutely gorgeous. I love the look of the mysterious ghost room. I thought that was really impressive. But then there's other sequences like the Act of Kindness and the Elemental where the cinematography is like nowhere to be found. The editing by John Ireland, it's fine, but I really do feel that some of these segments could have been cut down a little bit, especially in Act of Kindness. That feels like it's an hour long. And that might be because of the script, not really the editor. It could be a combination of the two. The score by Douglas Gamely, it's there. And you know, it's not one of his best, but it's fine. It's nothing that is ear-bleedingly terrible. It's nothing that's going to make you want to run out of the room. It doesn't make scenes laughable. It adds a little bit to the atmosphere, but the problem is the film has a lot of segments that are either boring and tedious or segments that are just ridiculous. And it doesn't matter what the music is because it's just silly nonsense. It has a running time of 97 minutes, but it honestly feels like it's 20 or 30 minutes longer than that, which makes it kind of a slog to sit through, especially when you get to the second segment. And this one, like I said earlier, the film did not do well in the box office. I can see why. And it seemed like the trend of horror anthologies from Britain was starting to die off when this film came out. So you have the framing segment is Peter Cushing, and he has this store called Temptations Limited, and he has all these different rare antiques, and the people come into his shop, and if they try to cheat Peter Cushing, they end up getting their comeuppance. But there's other people who really didn't cheat him that much, or they kind of did, but then they get their comeuppance in a way that has almost nothing to do with the shop, especially the second segment. So the first segment is called The Gatecrasher. You have David Warner, and David Warner's fine. He's good in this. I thought his performance was good. I just felt that the segment was just really predictable. And predictable might not necessarily be it's not necessarily always a problem for me if it's entertaining. And I just thought this was just blah. It was like there. I was more entertained or more enthralled by some of the mirror tricks and the effects they did in this segment than the segment itself. So Edward Charlton, played by David Warner, he purchases an antique mirror from the Temptations Limited shop, and of course it's haunted. He takes it home. He holds a seance for some reason with his friends. He falls into some kind of trance. He then wakes up, and then there's this sinister ghost played by Marcel Steiner who is in the mirror now, and it's commanding him to kill people so he can feed the blood to him so he can come back to life. A lot of tired and true, generic fare here. Generic storytelling. And it doesn't help either that Marcel Steiner is either asked by the director, Kevin Conner, or by the producers, or this is what the screenplay gives him. His approach to the ghost is just laughable. He's just chewing the scenery too much to the point where there's nothing scary about this. It's about as scary. I mean, I've seen scarier shit at the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. He's all like, I must be fed. Feed me. Feed me. I need blood. Give me blood. Blood. It was just laying it on way, 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 way too thick. I was like, feed me? What are you, Audrey 2? Feed me, Seymour. I need blood. So, it pretty much ends the way you think it was. The ghost, keeps asking Edward to keep killing people and feeding him. He finds out that he's been killing people in a trance, burying them under not really burying, but hiding them under the floorboards in his apartment. And the ghost wants him to kill his girlfriend, but he's like, no. And then there's this finale where the figure comes out of the mirror and he's all telling Charlton, kill yourself so you can become all powerful and blah, 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 and kills himself. And of course he ends up in the mirror. And then the segment ends with some other couple getting the house and then having a seance, and here comes Charlton through the mirror. It's just there. I'd rather watch that than an act of kindness, because it's not very kind, especially to my senses or to my eyes or to my mind, because I'm bored out of my mind watching this segment. So this one has Christopher Lowe, played by Ian Bannen, and he's this guy who's getting ragged on by his wife, who's a total bitch, and he's getting no respect from her or his son. This segment falls apart from the moment it starts, because this guy, Christopher, he's a sad sack. You feel so sorry for this guy. So it's like, why does he deserve this? Why does this guy deserve any kind of comeuppance? It just doesn't really mesh with me. And it's different, but there's a reason why horror anthologies and things like Tales from the Crypt don't have good people who are getting their comeuppance. Yes, he's a little bit overzealous, and he steals a Medal of Honor from the shop. That's bad, but compared to the other people in his life, and then you have the fucking twist at the end, which is basically, oh, your kid fucked you, your kid didn't like you, so we killed your ass. It's just one of those, like, well, the kid's a douchebag, and the wife was a bitch. Yeah, he stole a medal. But it's like one of those, it's like, this is just an awful segment. This is a terribly written segment. It goes on way too long. And yes, Angela Pleasence is creepy as fuck in this, creepy as hell. And it really does redefine the term creepy girl. But she doesn't save it, and neither does Donald Pleasence. And it ends with Christopher getting in a wedding, like he marries Donald Pleasence's daughter, Emily, the creepy girl, because she ends up helping him out and kills his wife. And then you find out that, oh, Underwood and Emma, Jim and Emily, Donald Pleasence and Angela Pleasence, they answer the prayers of a child one way or another, because when Emily goes to cut the cake, she cuts through one of those decorative grooms, and it ends up splitting Christopher's head open, and blood pours down, and he dies. It's just like one of those like bullshit. We always answer the prayers of a child. It's just, excuse me, I burp because this fucking segment makes me want to puke. It's that awful. It's that fucking terrible. Such a shitty segment. Then you have the Elemental. It has Reggie Warren, a character named Reggie Warren, played by Ian Carmichael. He is this uptight businessman. He goes to the Temptation shop and switches out some of the price tags on a snuff box. Apparently snuffing too much shit because I can't speak right now. He takes the snuff box, and then he meets this white witch clairvoyant played by Margaret Leighton, named Madame Orloff, on the train home, and she's an absolute delight. Just kooky old lady. I love her. She's great. She makes that segment watchable at least once for me because of her just charisma. She's fun to watch. I'd watch a show about this Madame Orloff going in and investigating all these different supernatural occurrences. So she tells him that you have an elemental on your shoulder, a particularly nasty one. And Warren's like, oh, it's a bunch of bullshit. And then he goes home, and his dog runs off. His wife, Susan, played by Nyree Dawn Porter, she gets attacked and choked almost to death by some unseen force while she's in bed one night. She thinks it's understandably her husband who's doing it, but then they quickly realize that it's not her husband, and they call Madame Orloff for help because she gave Reggie her card, and they exorcise the demon, the elemental, from their home, and there's all this craziness that happens. And there's some decent effects for the time, but you can tell that there are strings pulling books off the shelves and all this other stuff. But there's some fun to be had with that, just to see all this shit fly around the room. And, of course, the house is not clean. The elemental possessed his wife, and she kills him, and then, like, smashes it through the front door and laughs. And it's honestly kind of laughable the way that it's portrayed. This is a very comical segment. It sticks out like a sore thumb from all the other ones. It doesn't really feel like it belongs in this movie. But that being said, I did have some fun with it. It wasn't as bad as An Act of Kindness, but it still wasn't a good segment. It was just a below average segment with a entertaining performance by Margaret Leighton and some decent effects here and there. Finally, the movie almost over, like 10 to 15 minutes or whatever left. You finally get the last segment, and that one is, or I think 20 minutes. I'm not sure though, but you get the last segment, and this is easily the best segment out of the bunch. I know there are a lot of people who don't like this segment because they don't like the ending. I love this segment because it ends the way it does, and I'll explain why soon enough. So this segment has a character named William, played by Ian Oglivy. He's a writer who purchases this absolutely beautiful, intricate door from the proprietor, played by Peter Cushing. And he agrees to a reduced price with the proprietor because he's like, I can't really pay the full price, but the proprietor ends up working it out with him. He leaves the till open, the proprietor, when he leaves, because he goes back to the shop, but William doesn't steal the money, which is nice. He doesn't steal the money. He doesn't do that, which is why things end up differently for him in the end. And that's a big reason why I like this segment, because it's so unique from a lot of these other horror anthologies. So, and it's also got a great concept and a great idea, and it's actually really well executed. So Seaton's wife, Rosemary, played by Lesley-Anne Down, she thinks the door is too grand fancy to put in the front of a stationery cupboard, and she honestly has a point. But she touches it, and then she sees all this stuff, and actually is pretty fascinated with it, and thinks it's has a nice place there. But the door ends up really drawing Seaton to it. Like, it starts having this blue hue to it, and then the door opens up by itself, and then he goes inside, and there's this mysterious blue room. Like, all the walls are blue, everything is blue. He's like, what is going on here? This is just surreal and strange, and but at the same time scintillating, because it's like it's the unknown. Like, you're having the opportunity to explore the unknown. He finds the notes of a guy named Sir Michael Sinclair, who's played by Jack Watson, who is this evil occultist guy who created the door as a means to trap people and people's souls or their bodies inside of this ghost room, so we can, in essence, live forever. So Seaton ends up escaping from this door, from this room, this ghost room, but then he finds that the door's influence has started to spread throughout the house, and he can't get out of the house. He and Rosemary are trying to leave, but they can't do that. So what happens is that the room calls Rosemary to it. She goes to the room. She gets taken out by Sinclair. Sinclair carries her through the doorway. He's mocking Seaton. He's like, come on, follow me into the ghost room. You don't stand a chance. And Seaton ends up fighting off Sinclair. Rosemary actually gets released. She grabs an axe and starts wailing at the door. And that ends up incapacitating the Sinclair, because Sinclair, his powers are tied into this door. So he's trying to strangle Seaton, but Rosemary hits the door, and the door bleeds, and Sinclair is bleeding, and they then demolish the fuck out of the door, and the room then falls apart, and it's all done practically, and Sinclair then turns into a skeleton, and then fades away into dust, and then the dust blows away like dust in the wind, and then they actually hug each other, and they survive. The door is gone. It's just normal stationary cupboard now. And the proprietor, earlier in the film, early in the segment, you saw he was counting the money. But then at the end of this, he counts the money and finds out that all the money is there. So William did not steal the money. So that's why things ended well for him. I love that. I love that ending. I love the ending for that segment, and it's a big reason why I like the segment. I like the segment because Ian Oglivy does a good job, as well as Lesley-Anne Down. Jack Watson does a solid job with the little role that he has. And I just love the production design and the cinematography in this segment, the look of the ghost room, and the whole concept of the ghost room. And the ending really makes it stand out from a lot of other horror anthologies, because it's an ending where people survive. Then you have this guy who, this is actually something that happened in between some of the segments. He's trying to steal from the shop, and then he ends up trying to rob Peter Cushing, and then you find out the proprietor is actually, I guess, supernatural, because the thief tries to shoot him, and it doesn't work, and he ends up falling into an Iron Maiden. And then the proprietor speaks to the camera and welcomes the viewer as his next customer. He says, that he caters for all tastes, and that each purchase comes with a big surprise. So, and that's From Beyond the Grave. I wish this was a better, more satisfying affair, satisfying film. It isn't, though. It's rated PG, but there is a decent amount of blood in it. And there's the last segment's really good. The first segment is okay at best. The second segment has some nice things about it, but they don't save it because it's a absolutely boring, tedious segment. And then the third one is laughable. And the fourth one is definitely the best this has to offer. And it is bittersweet that the Amicus horror anthology series has come to an end. And definitely bittersweet that it comes to an end like this, with this film. This is not a great showcase of the type of entertainment and the type of horror anthologies that Amicus was capable of making. So I don't know what else to say about this except I would say watch this at your own peril. Like it's one of those like if you're curious about it, give it a watch. But if you're not, it doesn't really sound like that much to you. Maybe just try to find the last segment and watch it somewhere online. Because there isn't really a lot to like about the rest of this movie, except for a few things here and there. But there's only one segment that is legitimately good in this entire horror anthology. That's like over an hour and a half. That definitely does rank it near the bottom of the list for horror anthologies. Like it's not as bad as VHS, and it's not as bad as Creepshow 3. It's not as bad as some of the other horror anthologies that I've seen, but it's also definitely one of my least favorite. But anyway, thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.